Okay, let's just get this out of the way right now. Forget everything you think you know about Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. Seriously, we treat it like this lofty, gentle philosophy book, something you'd read in a quiet library. But that's not what it is at all. This was a private journal. It was a series of desperate, urgent notes, written by a man under almost unimaginable pressure. This isn't just a book. It's a battle-tested, psychological operating system.
And when Marcus wrote this, you have to understand, he was not being poetic. He wasn't trying to be deep. He was the emperor of Rome, the most powerful man on the planet, and for him, this statement was a literal, day-to-day reality. He's describing his actual life on the front lines, trying to hold a crumbling empire together.
And this is the context that changes everything, the part we so often miss. The Meditations weren't written in some peaceful palace. They were scribbled down in smoke-filled military tents on the frozen Danubian frontier during these brutal wars. And as if that wasn't bad enough, the entire Roman Empire was being torn apart by one of the worst pandemics in history, the Antonine Plague. So you have this perfect storm, right? This collision of plague and war, and that was the crucible that forged this entire philosophy. This was never an academic exercise for him. These were mental tools, hammered into shape by pure catastrophe. And they were designed for one reason and one reason only: survival. And let's just talk about the scale of this plague for a second. It was most likely a nasty strain of smallpox, and it was absolutely apocalyptic. We're talking millions dead. It wiped out entire Roman legions. It created this constant, pervasive atmosphere of dread and chaos. It even killed Marcus's own co-emperor. Now just try to imagine being the one in charge through all of that. So how in the world did he cope? Well, he used this incredibly powerful reframing technique. Marcus made this radical comparison. He said, look, as absolutely terrible as this viral plague is, and believe me, he was seeing it up close, the real plague, the one that can actually destroy me, is the plague of the mind. Things like fear, cowardice, dishonesty. And why? Because he knew he couldn't control the virus. That was out of his hands. But what he had absolute 100% control over was his own integrity. For him, the moral threat was always greater than the biological one. All right, so that's the why behind all of this. Now let's get into the what, the actual system. And to really get it, we have to decode the very precise, almost military-grade language he used. A lot of the common English translations kind of soften it, they water it down, but the original Greek, well, it's incredibly specific. Take this word, for example, Hēgemonikon. It's usually translated as mind or reason, but that just completely misses the punch. The root word is Hēgemon, which means leader or commander. This is the executive part of your soul. It's the CEO in your head that gets all the data, makes the final call, and issues the orders. It's a term of command and control. And you can actually see this difference in the data, which is just fascinating. Epictetus, the former slave, was Marcus's biggest philosophical hero. But just look at their word choice. Epictetus uses the word prohairesis, which means choice, all the time. Makes sense, right? For a slave, the power to choose your response was pretty much the only freedom you had. But Marcus, the emperor, he preferred Hēgemonikon. He didn't just have to choose, he had to command himself. He had to rule his inner world just as fiercely as he ruled the outer one. Now, here is the second crucial piece of code, hypolepsis. This is the story, the opinion, the value judgment that we add on top of a raw objective event. Something happens, and then we decide what it means. And the Stoics believed that this step, this voluntary little narrative we add, that's where almost all of our suffering comes from. So here's how it works. It's a chain reaction. First, you get the fantasia. That's the raw impression. My legion was defeated. Then comes step 2. You add the hypolepsis, the judgment. This is a catastrophe. It's the end of the world. Then your Hēgemonikon, your inner commander, gives syncathesis, which is assent. It says, yep, I agree, this is a catastrophe. And only then does pathos or destructive emotion completely take over. The entire game for the Stoics is to jump in and stop the process right there, at step 2. And Marcus is absolutely relentless about this in his journal. He's constantly telling himself to throw out those added judgments. He saw that our emotional reactions aren't automatic. We're not puppets being jerked around by what happens to us. We are puppets being jerked around by the stories we tell ourselves about what happens to us. Okay, so we've got these incredible tools, but how do they fit together? Well, they aren't just a random collection of techniques. They're all designed to be assembled into a coherent, defensive system for your mind.
The great scholar Pierre Hadot called it the inner citadel, a fortress of the self that nothing and no one can break into.
So if we're going to build a fortress, what are the walls made of? Well, Marcus gives us a really clear blueprint. The walls of the citadel are built from 3 core practices or disciplines. You've got the discipline of assent, that's about logic, just seeing things as they are, without all the drama. Then there's the discipline of desire, that's about physics, really, about accepting the nature of the universe and what's not up to you. And finally, the discipline of action, which is all about ethics, just doing your job and helping others no matter what. And here is just a killer example of the discipline of assent in action. To fight off the arrogance that comes with being emperor, Marcus would look at his fancy imperial purple robe, the ultimate symbol of power in the world, and he would mentally strip it down to its physical parts. Sheep's wool, dyed with the blood of a shellfish. This wasn't him being cynical. It was a mental exercise to rip away the hypolesis, that story of imperial majesty, and just see the plain, objective reality underneath.
And for the discipline of desire, he had this incredible technique he called the view from above. Whenever he felt totally overwhelmed by the wars, the plague, the politics, he would zoom out in his mind. He'd picture the entire Earth from space, seeing his massive armies as just ants fighting over a crumb. This cosmic perspective didn't make him passive or uncaring. It just neutralized his ego and his anxiety, helping him accept his small part in the much, much bigger picture. Okay, this is all fantastic theory, but the big question is, how can we actually apply it in our own lives? What's so amazing about the meditations is that we can actually pull out an actionable 5-step cognitive routine that Marcus himself seemed to practice every single day.
And here it is. This is the daily protocol for building and maintaining that inner citadel. You start the day with a morning alignment. You actively practice assent and the view from above all day. You frame your actions with something called the reserve clause, and you end with an evening review.
So let's make this super practical. How do you actually practice step 2, the discipline of assent, say in a modern office? It's about separating the data from the drama. So instead of the catastrophic thought, our Q3 earnings were a disaster, our reputation is ruined, you practice a Stoic description. Q3 earnings are 15% lower than Q2. Several media outlets have reported on this. See the difference? You remove the emotional charge, and that allows your rational mind, your inner commander, to actually get to work on a solution. And step 4, the reserve clause. This is another total game changer. It's so simple. By just adding the phrase fate permitting or if nothing prevents me to your goals, you psychologically separate yourself from the outcome, which you can't control, and you focus entirely on your effort, which you can. So if an obstacle gets in your way, it's not a failure, it's just fate intervening, and your new job is to deal with that obstacle virtuously.
But we have to talk about the elephant in the room, right? The huge modern revival of Stoicism. There's a really important difference between the original philosophy and what you often see today. Traditional Stoicism was a whole way of life, where the ultimate goal was virtue, being a good person. The modern life hack version often frames it as just a productivity tool, where the goal is success through emotional control.
So what gets lost in that translation? Well, pretty much the entire metaphysical foundation. For Marcus Aurelius, acting with virtue made sense because he believed he was aligning himself with the logos, what he saw as a rational, providential, almost divine order to the universe. When you strip that part away, the ethics can become just a set of techniques for suppressing your emotions, without any real deep moral compass guiding them.
So I guess the crucial question this all leaves us with is this one. Marcus Aurelius built his inner citadel to protect his ability to be a good man and a good leader for his people. It was a fortress for virtue. As we start to pick up these incredibly powerful ancient tools, we have to ask ourselves a pretty tough question. Are we using them for the same reason? Or are we just building a more comfortable, more resilient bunker for our own ego?